Hello, Dan.
Hi, Harold.
So you're reporting this week on a council decision involving, it's approval of another residential building, but this one's on industrial land.
Yeah, yeah. You know, City Hall deals with a lot of rezoning applications, and I've covered a lot of them, and I've sat through and watched many, many more, and a lot of them are sort of routine, where it kind of follows the same. Occasionally, something will be really controversial, or it's strikes a nerve with the public, and there's a lot of opposition, or sometimes something's a big news for some other reason. But a lot of them do tend to be kind of similar. A couple of things about this one made it kind of unique. It's not super common where city staff, it happens occasionally, but it's not usually. What happens is city staff comes to council and says, here's this rezoning. We've been working on this, with the developer, whether it's a new office tower, new residential tower, some other kind of building. Usually city staff says, we've been working on it with the developer, and here's the reasons why we're recommending the council should approve this. We're going to get these public benefits. It's going to help us with our housing goals or our hotel goals, to add more hotel rooms. It's going to help with this or that. And council explains the reason they think city staff explains the reason they think council should approve it. So the one thing off the bat that made this project a bit different is city staff presented it to council, and Josh White, the head of planning, was saying at the start of the public hearing, sometimes I'm presenting something that's a bit unusual, and this would definitely qualify, because staff were presenting and saying, it's up to you, but we're recommending you should not approve this. So their staff's principal recommendation was, don't approve this, because we don't, policies don't currently allow building this residential development on a property that's zoned for industrial. So the developer is saying they're proposing to build, or they've just been approved now to build, it's a 25-story tower, but the lower three levels of this bigger podium would be reserved for industrial space. And then above that, the other stories will have rental homes. So the developer is saying, currently it's a hole in the ground. If you let us build this, it's going to add housing to above industrial property, but you're still going to get usable industrial space that's going to provide jobs. The argument is sort of, cities need to protect their industrial space because it's good for the local economy. It's important. It creates employment, and it just helps a well-functioning city.
And we don't have a lot of it, right?
We have very little. Only about 6% of Vancouver's land is zoned for industrial use, and 90% or so is zoned for residential use. So basically, city staff said their first recommendation is they don't recommend you approve this. Send it back to us for more work, because city staff are currently in the process of doing a bunch of work on looking at certain industrial areas of Vancouver and what might be the ways and opportunities to change those areas, including potentially adding residential development in certain places. But city staff are doing that work right now. So they basically said to council, just don't approve this project right now. Wait until we come back to you after doing this planning work that you've asked us to do. But city staff.
Sorry, what is staff's objection? Because I guess if I'm listening to what you're saying, you're getting both here. You're getting industrial land being used for industrial, but then you're also getting much needed housing. We all know we need more housing above. So isn't it a win-win? Why does staff say it's not
and that's the sort of the gist of what the developer was presenting, and that's kind of the argument, that's sort of the sentiment that councilors expressed, and it was approved unanimously. So people across party lines, it wasn't a sort of a partisan thing. Some of the worries that city staff presented are that if you go ahead, so industrial is important for the local economy, the regional economy. It creates jobs and stuff, but it's not the most profitable use of the land for developers. If they can build market housing in the past, often that was condos. Now it's more often market rental, whatever, but it's just a more profitable use of the land to build a residential tower. So there is a worry among city staff and some other people outside of City Hall. There's a worry that if you start approving residential uses on industrial land, it could create a bit of a rush where developers start buying up industrial land, driving up the price of this land with an expectation, whether they're correct or not, but with an expectation that they're going to be able to get it rezoned for residential use, which is going to be way more valuable to them. And so for a long time, Vancouver has had these policies, and Metro Vancouver at the regional level has these policies that try to preserve industrial lands, this small amount of industrial land for industrial purposes, which helps keep, it's kind of like the agricultural land reserve in a different, that was a comparison one planner made. It's like, you know, it would be more valuable to property owners if you're allowed to build condo towers where farms currently are, but a provincial government decades ago kind of recognized the value, not the monetary value necessarily, but the value to having this agricultural land for food production. So it was put on a reserve and put into a reserve, sort of a specific, it can only be used a certain way. So that was a comparison one retired city planner used, you know, like compared to the ALR. It's like, it's such a tiny amount of our land base. We actually have a lot of land in Vancouver that is zoned for residential, and we actually currently have a lot of land in Vancouver that's zoned for high density residential. You look through the Broadway plan, 500 some odd city blocks, not all of it, but a lot of it is zoned for big, high residential. So they're saying we don't need to start allowing this. So there are these worries that this could trigger, you know, open the floodgates and people start, it triggers a bunch of speculative activity. So that there was that's one of the
It's
worries.
interesting. I understand that concern, but I also try to look at it from the other side. If you because you hear a lot from people who talk about the future of industrial lands who will say, well, sort of the last century's definition of industrial use has changed, right? Now we're talking about a lot of technology companies, stuff that's very like low impact in terms of the neighborhood, right? And so you could, in theory, have more industrial at 2 and 3 stories, and then because you're not building above a cement factory or above a manufacturing plant of some sort.
And that was kind of also the rationale put forward by some of the councillors, and the developer, who obviously has vested interest in what happens here. But that's what sort of a lot of the councillors were saying is, you know, if you look at where it is, it's in the Mount Pleasant industrial area, and you know, that's been an industrial area for several decades now. Prior to that, it was a residential area, and then they kind of started adding industrial uses into there. So you do actually have spread throughout there some old houses that were built 100 years ago and have just kind of been grandfathered in. But a lot of the newer businesses that have moved into the industrial properties in that area are, as you say, biotech companies. Abcelera has built a massive, so there's laboratories and there's software engineers and things like this. So, and that is kind of what council is saying. And also, if you look at where this is, it's a short walk to a Canada Line station, literally just across the street are a bunch of residential towers. It's not as though it's in the middle of a sort of industrial,
like Campbell Valley out in Surrey, which is like
it's not like surrounded by like vast swaths of heavy machinery and heavy industry. And they were trying to make the case that maybe it's time to modernize the way we look at industrial lands and the way we think about industry, because it is quite imaginable that somebody might be a software engineer who works on the 3rd story of this building, or I don't know, whatever kind of other kinds of industrial, light industry or creative industry they call it, and then the same person might want to live upstairs in the same building or live a short SkyTrain right away somewhere else. So that's you can see it. Now, I spoke with Christina DeMarco, who's she's retired now. She's a former City of Vancouver planner and Metro Vancouver planner who appeared at council and spoke against this. And she and a number of other sort of older retired planners and some other academics and some of the folks who worked on these policies in years past, a lot of them have been raising concerns about this. And she made the point that she said, in theory, if you do allow other kinds of light industry in there, you're just heavily limiting the amount of the different types of industrial uses that could happen there. And we do still need places for auto mechanics and whatever other kinds of industry that might be disruptive to people who are living directly upstairs if they're noisy or whatever. So she was making the point that if essentially if you're talking about having office space, like we have zoning for offices, and she's saying that if you do that, it's just it's limiting the amount of industrial activity that could happen there.
Right. Well, interesting. Well, we'll see how it plays out. We'll see if staff was right, and we're going to see a run up of or if this is a one-off, or if this is the future of industrial land.
Yeah, and City Council did try to sort of send some messaging that they don't want this. They don't want other developers to think that everybody's going to be able to do this. They kind of try to, this is a unique situation for these reasons. But as we say, city staff are currently in the process of looking at 5 specific industrial areas around town to look at if and how we might be able to intensify the uses there, which could include adding some residential in certain places. So they're looking at that. City staff are working on that as we speak right now.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Harold.